cycling is a very, very important way in order to reduce our carbon emission. So I'm the only one that went literally from Paris to Baku, to the COP, because we crossed 11 countries. Suddenly, out of nowhere, from the bush, there are two teddy bears that come, and when I say teddy bears, they're huge, they could have killed us. I can tell you that during this COP, it's like you have the feeling that the clock is ticking. You have 2 weeks and you have 30,000 people.
Welcome to Travel Devil. I'm your host Clara Francken, and in a world full of mass tourism, we're here to talk about unconventional travel. Let's get into it. Today we're talking about a 6-month bicycle journey towards the climate conference COP. I'm sitting today with Guillaume Otrage, who is not a professional cyclist, yet chose to travel sustainably to reach the conference with 10 different propositions for cyclists. Guillaume, can you introduce yourself with your own words?
Hello, Clara. Thank you for getting me on your podcast. So, my name is Guillaume. I would say in summary that, I'm a cyclist since I'm 3 years old. So I like that sport, and I've been starting to use cycling more heavily in the past 8 years, but we're going to talk more about that. Professionally, I work in the IT sector, trying to help people and do good things with IT. And I'm the father of 2, and I live in the suburbs of Paris.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for being on the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about your journey, your bicycle journey, the last one that you used to go to COP. But before we talk more about that, I want to get a little bit more into your childhood and get to know you as a person a little bit more. So can you tell me, where did you grow up and did you travel a lot when you were a kid?
In fact, I was born in the US because my parents, both French, were there for a few years. So I happened to start my life there. But then quickly we moved to France. We moved a bit from town to town. But most of my childhood was in a town called Grenoble in France, next to in the Alps. So a lot of ski, a lot of that. But there was not too much traveling in my childhood. I aspired to travel, but in fact, mostly I was in Grenoble until I was 18, and then things changed because, I wanted to travel, basically.
Okay, wow. And like your passion for sustainability, when did that start?
So it's an interesting question, Clara, because if you can answer that question, you can answer also the question of how people can change around you. And I've always wondered how to make that happen. I think for me, they were reading about some certain authors and listening to, I would say, various media. So I would say it's other people that put me on the way. I recall one time when at Christmas I offered some Xerox of a book about sustainability to the family. So I would say progressively, and I think it took place over the past 10 years, I would say. But before I had no special interest, and that says that we can change, yes.
But did you then grow up more at the countryside, like were you surrounded by nature a lot as well, or did that not affect you so much?
No, I was really a city. I mean, I was in a provincial city. I loved nature. I always loved hiking, and I'm grateful to my parents for having put me on the way with a backpack and following them on hikes. So I got an interest in nature, in sports. In fact, I snowboarded and I did various snow-related sports when I was young. But I would say, you can like nature and enjoy it and take advantage of it, which is not a nice word, or you can, and at this stage you respect it. But then it's another thing to actually say, okay, I'm going to devote some of my time to protect the nature. And, it's a difference between walking on a beach and taking out the plastics from the beach. There are two distinct approaches.
Yes, definitely. And you also mentioned that you traveled a lot as a younger person, like not when you were a kid, but then you started traveling to see the world. Why was that important for you?
It was important for me, and it is important for me because you can discover things, and I think when you feel that drive, this intellectual and emotional drive, then it's hard to resist. And so I didn't travel much until I was 18, and then afterwards I started to travel to the US, where I worked there. Very early on in my studies, I went in Pakistan and India, and I was working for a company selling glasses, in fact, to European sunglasses and glasses. So I actually took the choices professionally in my studies to go towards other countries and to specialize in that. And then I started to travel a lot. And the more that you travel, the more you get addicted to travel, because it really makes you, like I said, discover things, meet people. You're astonished. I like to be astonished, and this is by traveling that you achieve that. So,
yeah, and I'm wondering, like, at a certain time, you were like, okay, maybe I traveled a lot. I took a lot of planes, and then at some point, you decided not to take the plane so much anymore.
Yeah, this is interesting, and this is something I should say, because it's kind of easier to stop taking planes when you've taken planes a lot. So I would say, this is to be humble on my behavior here. I've traveled a lot, and I've consumed, a lot of carbon, and I spent a lot of carbon doing on what I think, on retrospect, were quite silly occasions. You would fly back in my professional career. You would fly to Brazil or to Korea there were business reasons behind it. But when you think about it, and already at the time, the video conference capabilities were so good. I mean, we had, in particular, the last big company I worked for, we had such a nice video conferencing system that really felt like you were in the same room as the other person. And still we were taking planes. And I understand why, this could help, because a human relation does not replace a conf call. But when you put it in retrospect, you think, wow, that's a lot of carbon spent. As you know, carbon, when you emit it, it's done forever. I mean, you can have done this 30 years ago. The carbon you emitted 30 years ago is still here. And the carbon we're emitting today will still be here for hundreds and hundreds of years. So yeah, that's kind of silly. And the good thing now is companies and people realize the adverse effect of that. And I'm very glad to have changed my behavior compared to that. So I would say I stopped taking planes maybe back 4 years ago, thinking, it's a problem of taking planes. And now it's not that I will never do it, but because it may depend on the circumstances. And I don't shame people for doing that, because, sometimes that's the only solution, or you have very limited amount of time. But I would say for people like me that did travel a lot or took a lot of plane, there's no problem, and we should stop or diminish strongly our riding on planes.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I feel like for the professional part of it, I guess it can also be tricky, because some jobs require the travel. And some companies, they still want you to travel, even if you're like, okay, but I don't want to travel by plane. I mean, I don't know in your career how that went, but I can imagine that if this was a necessary thing for your career, that it was also difficult to be like, okay, I'm kind of starting to understand the issue here, and I want to stop this in my private life. But then in your professional life, you still have to do it for a while, because this is just like a prerequisite of your job. And that can be pretty, yeah.
Yeah, at least you need to raise a question. I think at least you need to speak with your manager, speak with your peers, and say, I'm uncomfortable taking the plane. Start to spread around that it should be something to be considered. And, when we think about it, I can't remember the exact figure, but maybe there is a very small percentage of our carbon emission, but it's a lot of emission for the persons that actually do it when you compare to the allowance of carbon emission we have per year. So I would say, let's not make it too big an issue, but let's raise the question when we're in our professional environments, that at least people understand it. And I've had just recently a friend of mine, she was organizing a seminar for a group of people in her business, and then she just raised the question, say, hey guys, should we really go to that destination? that will force us to take plane? Should we go to a destination in France where we will not have to do that? And in fact, the seminar took place in France, and they took the train. So, see, just raising the question and not forcing, but raising the question can be the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very strong. Yeah, and I feel like I've recently even heard of a friend of mine who's working in Spain in a pretty big company, and they're also like promoting a lot of like that they're like a greener company and everything. And even her manager took the plane between Barcelona and Madrid, where there's like definitely train connections. And so she doesn't want to do that, but they always propose it to her, like, oh, if you have to go to the conference, you can just take the plane. For me, it was like, wow, but you work, I'm not going to name drop the company, but you work there. This is like not possible. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people are still not at the point where they really like want to change their own behavior. And so you decided to travel to the climate conference, COP. What is COP?
So COP, it's a good question because, I mean, so people that know, they say COP, but we in fact saw during our travel that it's not obvious at all. So COP is the Global Climate Conference. It's a climate conference. It happens every year. And the reason behind COP is to get all the countries of the world, or almost all of them. I think there's something like 180 or 190 countries in this conference, to sit together and agree on what will be the decision, what will be their plan in order to reduce the greenhouse effect gas. Yeah, decide commonly on what's the course for doing that. I mean, there are also I'm mentioning one of the COP, there's also a COP, a climate conference specifically on biodiversity, which is another topic. But the one we'll talk about during this program will be this one specifically focusing on emission of gases. So basically, they sit together and try to agree, and we can discuss about this because it's something which is not compulsory. So in terms of governments, the countries are not forced to commit to whatever, but through joint discussion and clarification between them, they agree to certain commitments in order to reduce emissions, which, by the way, are very far from what we need to do, and that's a concern. Or it's a concern, and it's also a general critic that people can have about the COP, because it doesn't allow us to go as fast as we should. My position being that it is important at least to do that. I mean, you could do more, that's for sure. But if there were no COPs today, there wouldn't be any, I would say, common effort, and a lot of countries would commit far less than they are doing today. So it's not enough, it's not fast enough, but it's something that has to be done and that we should respect and give its credit to.
And I hear a lot about like the number behind COP as well. So for example, now you went to COP29, which was confusing me because we were like 2024. Can you explain how the number 29 came about?
I think you're right. I will invite our listeners to check. The dates that I can remember is there was the Conference of Paris in 2015, which set the objectives that we need to achieve in order to maintain our increase of temperature a maximum to 1.5 degrees, which, by the way, we're not reaching. And then originally it started from the Rio conference, but maybe you found the answer, Clara, while I was talking.
Yeah, I did actually.
Can you please answer the question?
The 29th meeting of Conference of the Parties, so COP, to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It was a landmark international treaty agreed in 1992 and parent treaty to the 2015 Paris Agreement. So, yeah. It does have a lot of links to what you were saying, and it is the 29th meeting. So it's the number of that explains that like next year it's going to be the 30th anniversary of COP.
So there's a lot of history behind COPs, and some of the people we met were there at the first COPs, and it's something that has a lot of maturity. It's a system, an ecosystem of parties, which are the different countries, but also of NGOs that are working together. it's a well-oiled machinery that dates back a while back. And I think, it's, like I said, it's something important, something rich. Not as strong as it should be, but it dates from a while back. And me, I'm a newbie since it was the first COP conference that I've done. And I would invite everyone, if they can, to actually attend one conference during their lifetime, because it's such an important event and such a strong event.
Yeah, I hope that I will be able to be there one day too. I had a question also because you decided to cycle to COP. Like, what was the thought behind deciding to cycle for such a long time to reach the conference? And what is the message you want to deliver there?
Well, the first thing in terms of, there's a little bit of shaming on the COP because there's a lot of plane travel to go there. We hear about private jets of leaders going to the conferences. So it's kind of, going opposite of that and saying, okay, it's a conference on sustainability, so let's use sustainable means of transport in order to do that.
Can you name the countries you cycled through to get to COP?
Yes, so we started from France, going to Germany, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan. So that's the first thing. And in fact, I can see already in this conference, I could see it is becoming a kind of a trend, and that's very nice to see. There was, for instance, a journalist that I met with from one of the French magazines that actually use train and buses to go to the COP. And so I think it starts to be also a kind of style of attending the COP, which is using sustainable means of transport. So that was the first thing. The second thing is I really believe, and we can talk more about that cycling is a very, very important way in order to reduce our carbon emission. I just throw a number here is that in fact, if we make that cycling, walking, and public transport reaches 80% of our journeys, we can actually reduce the carbon emission in the transport sector by 50%. So that's quite strong. So it means like really globally, if all the cities, all the countries reach this 80% target, then we can reduce our carbon emission by 50% in transport. And transport is the biggest sector in terms of carbon emission, or almost the biggest. You zoom into this figure and you look at walking, cycling, and public transport, you find that walking is something that it's hard to increase because it's cultural in a great way, in a strong way. You find that public transport is something that costs money and it takes a lot of time to implement when you're talking about a subway or a tram or these kind of things. Yeah, while actually cycling is something where, it costs money to build cycling lanes, but it's really, really nothing compared to the cost of other infrastructures. So I would say that when we look at our leverage to reduce our carbon emission quickly in the transport sector, cycling is definitely there. And then back to your question is why we decided to cycle is we wanted to do something which was a bit out of the extraordinary, that we could say to political leaders we wanted to meet at the conference, say, hey, we've done 6,500 kilometers because we believe in cycling, and here's why you should consider cycling strongly in your policies. And also, I would say another factor, it's a general message to the people, because if we were able to do 6,500 kilometers to go to the COP conference, well, okay, you can do a kilometer to go and buy your bread, for instance.
I've got a question concerning you speaking in a we form. Who is we?
It's an interesting question. So we, I can say in the biggest sense of the we is the 200 cyclists that at some moment were part of this ride to Baku, to the COP conference. So that's a we of people that took their bicycle and said, hey, I want to join this, I want to be part of it. And they were part of it. They could have been part of it for a day, for a week, or that depended. But that's the we in terms of physical aspect. We is also the community of cyclists in one way, which supported us through the social network and wanted us to be as impactful as possible. And the we is, you could also say, is the organization, the legal organization behind it. But I would say...
And the legal organization is called...
It's an NGO called COP Bike Rights, but that's a non-profit organization in France.
Okay, and you were one of the founders of that, or was it already existing and then you joined?
Well, I had this idea came to me in the fall of 2023. So at the time I was looking, there's the Dubai conference. Wouldn't it be great to cycle there? But I think this idea came in my mind a month before the conference took place. So there was no way to do the thousands and thousands of kilometers to there. And interestingly, I presented this idea to a friend in December, I would say. This friend told me, no, bad idea, don't do it. And it almost fell down at this point, and it almost did not happen. But luckily, I spoke with another person that got me back on this one. And then basically, I started to propagate it through social network, which I think it's a great way to onboard people as volunteers. And eventually, we were a little more than 20 volunteers that helped with the organization of that, and volunteers from all countries, the Netherlands, Turkey, Bulgaria, Austria. So there were really people from everywhere, and a lot of French people as well, yeah.
And how many people did eventually cycle the roads? You started in Paris and you cycled all the way, but then along the way, some people joined for one day, like you were explaining, but some people joined all the way to COP, or how did that go about?
So in fact, interestingly, so I'm the only one that went literally from Paris to Baku, to the COP. And then I would say at a given point of time during the ride, there were maybe, it depends on the place, but I would say 5-10 people, it depended on the moment. So I would say there were some people that did France, Germany, Austria. There were people that did the Balkans, and there were a few people that also came several times. They came for a bit in Germany, then went back home because they had to work, and then came back. And I would say with always the constraint of taking train or buses. So this was kind of a mandate into what we were doing, and so there were multiple, two-timers, or even there was a person that came 4 times during the ride. So
that's some dedication, yeah.
Yeah.
But then, did anybody else arrive together by bicycle in Baku, the last weeks or something, or?
There was in the backdrop, there was something that there was a lot of tension, political tension between the countries of France and Azerbaijan on some topics that I would say are pretty. No, not silly. Maybe there are strong topics behind it, but I would say it's a pity that when there is a conference like COP, there's some things very political that are getting in between. So anyway, there were some French people that decided just before entering Azerbaijan not to go into Azerbaijan because they were recommended not to go there. And so therefore, I would say if you're looking at the people, there were about 6 or 7 people in Georgia, and then eventually we were supposed to be, I would say, depends how you count, but I would say there were 3 people that actually made it to the conference. And then there was also the topic of getting some accreditation to reach the so-called blue zone of the conference, and there were 2 of us that actually could get into this area.
What is the blue zone of the conference, before we get into some more stories on the roads?
The blue zone, there are 2 zones in the conference. If you want to attend as someone from the public, you can go into a zone called the green zone, where you already have a lot of things happening. And then if you're an official or you want to meet with officials, like in our case, then you need to reach the so-called blue zone, which is a more restricted area. This is the area where the parties, the countries negotiate. They have their offices and private meeting rooms to do that. And they have also a number of more generic meeting rooms where you can hear them negotiating about certain topics.
All right. Okay. Interesting. That's good to know. I didn't know there were 2 separate places at the COP. Let's talk a little bit more about the road, because I think that's also really interesting. How did you come about planning all of this? Because you said there's 20 people behind it, but still you're alone on the road for a long time, or you're the one holding all of these lines together, let's say. and you're the one cycling, doing the physical work. How was that?
I mean, I really want to give credit here to the volunteers that worked on this, because there were many people that actually, for instance, talking about the route, if you do something like this on your own, then you can kind of adjust your pace and you can take decisions at the last minute. When you're doing this with a goal of actually interacting with cycling NGOs on the way, meeting with the town representative to discuss about cycling and see what they do in terms of policy and try to convince them, well, you need to know what time you will be in a given city. So that meant that literally we had a team, in fact, of 6 people that just looked at when we would be, where we would be, and when we would be. So they really did split down this 6,500 kilometers in a spreadsheet, and you had all the days and all the locations and the number of kilometers. So they were really a strong work of planning, which needed to be done in our case, not only because we were in a group, but also a group where people would join and exit from the group. So they had to know, exactly where we would be at a given point of time. Otherwise, we could not have meet to them. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is we wanted to make sure when we arrived in a given place that there would be the cycling NGO could expect us, organize some local events. So all of this, we had to be specific on the day. So there was good planning made ahead of time by a team. And then we were just, communicating remotely. We had our group, our messenger group, in order to exchange and discuss together.
Did you have a tracker?
No, but it's you don't need to be so specific about where you are. In fact, it could have been a good idea to have a tracker so that people that follow us can see, oh, that's nice, they're here or they're there. But in terms of organization, it was more like telling the team, hey, we're going to be there on this time. We're a bit ahead of schedule, behind schedule, organizing with the biking NGO and telling we're going to be, Monday, 10 a.m. And then they would plan for a cyclist gathering, let's say on the Monday evening with other cyclists. So this was this kind of rough organization that was getting more precise on the day before.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of hustle as well to make that happen. Yeah. In my experience of bicycle traveling, which is not as big as yours, but every time I plan something, it goes differently. So I cannot imagine, like, for such a long road, like everything. Of course, you have a deadline, so you have to be there at a certain day. But also, like, on the road, like, stopping, making sure all of these kilometers you're doing is manageable, making sure that if something happens on the road, the bicycle breaks, you're unwell, or something happens, it's like, okay, no, you got to get through it. You got to arrive at this place. And then you even have events. So you have to be there with a smile and talk about all of these things, which probably take a lot of energy, I think.
Yes. No, but I think after a while you factor this in, like you factor, okay, what happens if we have a flat tire? Okay, a flat tire can be, I don't know, in the worst case, maybe 45 minutes. So, okay, if we have one flat tire, this is what happens. But then there's also the unexpected, just when we arrived in Baku, this was just the start of the conference. One of us just goofs on make a small mistake on the navigation. And there was a huge hill just before getting to the conference because we took a route that was going to this hill. And suddenly you say, wow, this hill is looking like it's going to take us at least 50 minutes to go to take that hill. And we didn't plan for it. And so that's the part of the joy of traveling is, making a planning as good as possible, trying to anticipate. And that's fun because, you're like riding the wave, you're riding your bicycle, but you're trying to make everything fall into place. And I would say we never had a situation where we had, when we were expected by cyclists, there could have been 50 cyclists waiting for us at a location at a time and we wouldn't be there. And that didn't happen. So, but we took some margin and it went well on that aspect.
Yeah, and I'm sure also like other cyclists would also understand if there's a delay by bicycle due to whatever happens on the road, like they are more understandable as well, I guess, if that would have happened. And do you have any other like fun stories or something that happen on the road as well that are maybe some more adventurous days on the bicycle?
I would say when you're in bicycle, and it's like in any sports, sometimes you can be on the edge, and it's kind of interesting. I grew up in a place where there were a lot of mountains, and mountains can be deadly, so you have to pay attention to that. And I would say when you get on the edge in those sort of trip is you don't know exactly where you will sleep. You don't know what will be the weather condition. We had some snow that came at one portion of the trip, not big snow, but you start to see that it snows around you, that it doesn't hold on the road, but it could be holding on the road, the snow. You start to think, okay, it's getting late. In some stage, we were in the night, and like you say, okay, how can my body go and over that? Because if it gets really cold, then you start to think, okay, it's better if I take the time to set up the tent, but then it's very cold, and I will lose energy doing that. Will I have the energy to do that? Will I have the energy if I have a flat tire at this moment? It means I must sleep here, and it may not be suitable for sleeping. So I would say adventure is sometimes you're planning for things and you end up that it's nighttime and it's cold and it's windy and reminding you that you need to be cautious. So this was, I would say, adventure all the way when I would say sometimes we didn't manage very well the weather and the timing conditions. Other than that, there was some retrospectively funny but scary stories, because we were once into a crater in Turkey, and in Turkey there are a lot of bears, and mostly you don't see them, but there's a lot of bears compared to our regions in Europe. And then suddenly out of nowhere, from the bush, there are two teddy bears that come, and when I say teddy bears, they're huge. They could have killed us. They were teddy bears, but they were already big enough.
So not teddy bears that you want to hug in the night.
Yes. Sorry, maybe I'm using the wrong word. Teddy bear is a bear. Teddy bear, I would say cubs. Yeah, cubs is the right word. Small bear. And we were really scared, and they progressed to us, not fast, but they were both slow and fast. Like sometimes they could go suddenly very fast in some of their gesture. And actually we were having a picnic, and all they wanted is our food. So they stopped at our food, and we went back very scared when they started to approach. And eventually they stopped at the food. But that was really a scary moment. And when you see this, you know the story also that when they are cubs, there's a mommy bear somewhere, and maybe she's would be unhappy to see that her cubs are so next to human beings. So,
how did you handle with like camping in such a region? Because I know a friend of mine who camps as well in a region which is close with bears as well, and she told me something about a triangular form, which would mean like you put your tent in one place, then you put a fire pit in another place, and then the third part of like the third corner of the triangle, you put the food, so that you don't sleep where the food is, and you also don't sleep where the heating is, kind of. And so if the bears would come, they would probably go to the food and not go to your sleeping area.
Okay, well, thanks for the advice. For next time, we'll know it.
Okay.
No, we were not that prepared. No, the only thing is we knew is not to put the food in the tent. I mean,
that's a good,
because so the food was outside the tent, but and there was also one time there was one guy that joined us. He had wolves around him, so there was a pack of stray dogs, and maybe they could have been wolves, but he was in his tent, and they were around, and they were like attacking his food, and there were a group of them, and it was a bit scary. But I would
he
say
was alone. This was on the way to meeting you.
Exactly. And
in which country?
I think it was in Bulgaria that it happened, and he had, he was really scared, so he had in fact to shout in order to kind of get them away. So, but I don't know if it was any use, but he started to shout in his tent, and that was the way. And in fact, there was there was also a lot of stray dogs that we had to deal with, a lot of them that we crossed. So the best technique in that, when you're in that, is, in fact, it could be shout. It depends on the dog. Sometimes shouting doesn't work. I would say So just to be sure, you just start to stop your bike. You go slowly, you stop your bike, you show that you're not afraid. You go down of your bike on the opposite side of the dog, and in 100% of the cases, the dog will stop barking and it will be okay.
So you go down on the other side of the bicycle?
Yeah, exactly.
So with the bicycle, let's say I'm cycling and there's a group of dogs coming at my right, I will start slowing down, stop the bike and go off the bike at the left side so that there's still a bike in between us.
Yes. Because the bike is a way to protect yourself. I've seen even some police training where actually they use the bike in order to protect themselves. It has a weight and it has something. So of course with dogs they can go around, and that's in theory. But what is in practice and tested on, I would say dozens and dozens of dog situation is you stop your bike. And you're impressive because you're all covered. This not in, maybe this more in wintertime, but you're all covered. You've got your glasses, you've got your helmet. They see you're strong. You've got your bicycle, they see you're strong, and they stop there. I'm saying this because this is in theory, and then we have the practice where you're late, you want to reach a certain destination, you say, okay, I will not stop for the dog. And then you don't stop, and then you start maybe shouting at them in order to get them away. And eventually one of them bit my shoe, but it was only the shoe. It shows that sometimes you cannot escape. Stopping the bike is 100% works. Never bitten in such situation.
Yeah, okay, good to know. I hope I will not cross such paths, but I feel like the more I talk to cyclists, the more, depends on the country, but it's very likely to come across stray dogs in some countries. So you cannot really avoid it if you're cycling through some areas. I'm wondering as well, you had some moments which were very difficult, and maybe you just doubted how it was even possible to continue the road like that, I can imagine. What did you do to keep yourself motivated besides having the team? What did you do to keep yourself motivated?
I would say the first thing is not to think about it. And this was especially the case when I just on day 3 of the ride, I had a sprayed ankle, just a little bit. But this was really tough because when you pitch your tent and when you have a sprayed ankle, you start to do a lot of it's very difficult to do that. So of course the others were healed a bit to help me, or a lot. I'm sure they would have been here a lot if I asked them to, but I didn't want to wait for the group, so I tried to do things by myself as much as possible. So I had to deal with this. And when you're in your tent, and we had really bad weather in terms of during this summer, so when you're in your tent and it rains and you sprain an ankle and you think, wow, it's just maybe 10 days into it and you've got all this distance to cover, the best thing is actually not to think about it, and not to think how, because one could say, yeah, you find the motivation, you motivate yourself, you say this is a great thing, but frankly, it was kind of easy to forget about everything that was remaining to do because we had so many things to do in the instant. And I would say, cycling is a kind of meditation, or a long distance cycling trip is a meditation, because although I'm saying we had to plan, and this is true, we had to plan, there's a lot of times you need to be in the instant moment. How do I deal with that? Okay, next thing is I need to eat. How do I cook my food? Next thing is I need to get ready for the night. What are the things that I need in order to have a good night? And all of these things that make that you're in the instant moment. So when you're in your tent and you're tired and you could be doubtful about what's remaining anyway, you just don't think about it and you sleep right away. So I would say this is the type of thing. And then, of course, I think progressively you build yourself a character for that, because the more you're spending time, the more you see your resilience, the more you're capable of crossing barriers. And then if you feel tired or sick or whatever, you have this objective which is greater than you. You have, of course, the team, like you said, and then you do it because you have this kind of mental training that tells you to do it. And I would say for people that want to cycle long distance, I would say to them, you could think it's too hard. I will never be able to do, 10 days, already, in one day I'm completely exhausted. In fact, your body adapts and your mental adapts, and you get into a kind of rhythm, of pace, where in fact, what's hard is to stop, is not to continue. After a while, you find that.
Mm. That's a good thing to know. And so it's like you have to persevere the first days, and then the roads will lead your way, I guess. Do you also have some heartwarming or like surprisingly good interactions you had with people along the way? Because you probably met like a lot of people.
Yeah.
What was like one of the most beautiful interactions you had?
Maybe I can think of a couple or three. I would say the hospitality. We were close to Turkey, and a person came to us and he had some food and he offered it to us. And at the time, we thought he wanted to sell it to us. That was our first reaction. And then we realized, oh no, this is just he sees that we're on the road and he wants to share that. I had a shepherd. We met many shepherds on the way. They're very poor people, and he saw me on the bike, and I was behind the others, and I was on my own, and he saw me on the bike, and he offered me some nuts that he had in his pocket. This was heartwarming. Another time is we were, in fact, preparing to reach a city, and I can say more specifically, it was Istanbul. And the Turkish team of cycling organization that was preparing the moment for us said, we were talking about organization. When we arrive, what do we do? What is needed for instance, for the meeting, we need a megaphone. That's, we're basically talking logistics. And then suddenly one of the person in the group says, but what do you need? But you, Guillaume, and the team, what do you want? Like for yourself, have you got some physical issues? Do you need to see doctors? Would you like to get some massage or anything? And it was so sweet because we are, sometimes you're like machines. You're thinking, I've got this goal, I've got this mission. We go to the COP, we push cycling policies and etc. Can we do this and that? And then suddenly there's someone saying, yeah, but what about you? And that's really, really, really strong. And I would say it's probably, something we should recall in our work situations, in our different projects is, just to pause, take a breath, and ask the others what he needs or she needs more specifically. So that was heartwarming.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps listening to that. That's true. Yeah, it's beautiful to hear because when you're always like thinking, okay, I want to do this for a bigger purpose, or I'm like all the time on 100, and then all of a sudden somebody's like there and says like, okay, I'm listening to you. What do you want? That's probably like, whew, what do I want?
Yes, goosebumps. And I had this exactly, it was very interesting. We were in our virtual meeting, our Zoom conference, and then I had this, suddenly, someone is asking how I feel. And, while you're trying to get rid of the personal aspect because you represent the group, and it's so strong. The other moment I would say was very heartwarming, and there were several of these, but I recall one particularly where there was a very good connection with the local cyclists that were here to support us. So you can imagine yourself when you're sharing why you're doing something, and then the crowd in front of you, which I don't know, maybe it was 40 people or so, you feel they really understand what you're doing. They want you to succeed, and they will also help you to do that. And when you share this goal, and because we had a little game of saying, when we arrive in a place, we had a game of asking people why they cycle. So we would do the game that in 1 minute they would need to give as many reasons why they cycled. And the goal was to be the number one city in terms of answers. And then, when you say to them, okay, among the many reasons why you cycle, there's one of them that you should bear in mind is that you're helping protecting the climate. And when you feel these people really endorse this message and they want to help this message resonate in their cities with their friends, with their connections, I think it's very strong. Because you feel you're not, just, I would say, a few people on their bikes. You're a big community of mindset, of values, which surpasses you, and it's a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great feeling.
Wow. Yeah, that's very beautiful. I also have prepared a little game called This or That. And it's basically I'm asking you to choose between A or B. And then, like, very briefly, you can say why you choose that one. So if you're ready, we can start with the first one.
All right. Okay. Look forward. Go ahead, Clara.
Okay. This or That. Debating at COP or inspiring change on the roads?
Inspiring change on the road. Because we were in very practical things. I felt when we were at the COP, we were like, we would meet, for instance, and I cannot give names, but I would say we would meet with a minister or someone in charge of transport, and we would say, what are you doing for cycling? And so there was always like political and polite. And I'm not saying it was not useful, but it was always very framed. And you couldn't say if the person was talking from the heart to just say, yeah, of course, we'll plan cycling in our project, in our investments, and etc. So there was this kind of fake aspect.
Yeah, maybe a disconnection.
Yeah. It was while everything that happened locally with the town representatives locally was more detailed, was more in depth. There were some moments when I was received by someone, and then I would say this person, doesn't care about bicycle at all. And then in the end of the meeting, you put forward your arguments, you talk about what he could implement in terms of biking policies, and you see there's real interest from that person. So that was efficient.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I think I already know the answer, maybe, of the next This or That, but you tell me. This or That, global commitments or local impact?
No, you don't know the answer to that, Clara.
I don't know the answer, okay.
I'm hesitating. I'm really certain that we must have global commitments because this is where the big numbers are playing. And this is why I'm saying the COPs are important, because even though we don't do what we should, when you've got such amount of countries saying, okay, we're gonna spend so many billions of dollars and transfer them from the north to the south, although it's not the number that you would want, it's a big number. And the big things that are going to happen. So I would say this global is important. But having said this, and I'm a town councillor in a city called Meudon, next to Paris, where I live, I'm so convinced that the work gets done also locally. But these people, I had coming back from the COP and sitting with the team of the town hall to discuss status on the biking situation in my city, I said, okay, can you use the 10 proposals as the framework for our discussions? Because it's a framework that covers all aspects of cycling policies. And I thought, well, Guillaume, you can write all the way to COP to push these proposals, but what happens in your town, you must apply them in your town. And then it was like magic, because the framework of the proposals, when it was illustrated and filled with what would happen locally, what was done and what was planned, I felt, oh, this is really efficient because this is very concrete. This is like, this bike lane is going to happen there, and it's part of a plan.
All right, next, This or That. This or That, reducing your own personal carbon footprint or reducing corporate emissions? Also a difficult one.
The figure is the corporate emission, because when you look at the impact that you can have, the impact is more from what the state and the corporation are doing. So I would say if you need to choose, and if you need to allocate your time, and you don't have that much time, maybe you focus on the corporate emissions and change that. So in one way, I would say it's more efficient to have the discussion in your company and say, yeah, should we stop using plane, or should we reduce our amount of plane travel? It's more efficient to discuss this in your work rather than discuss it at home with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your family, because it will have more impact. And of course, you should do both.
Yeah.
If you had to choose, I would say that.
All right, last, This or That. This or That, highlighting the joys of cycling or highlighting the necessity of action?
It's a good question, because I would say, it's a very important question, because when we go on this journey to promote cycling. It's a very, what you could think, a very narrow topic because, for instance, when we were in Georgia, there were some elections and the elections were manipulated by one of the parties. And it was a big topic. And we were coming here with our small topic of bicycle. And it's the same thing when we spoke to a political person in the COP. He had to manage big topics in order to reduce the carbon footprint of the country. And he would say, when we're talking to him or her and we spend, we mobilize 10, 15 minutes of his or her time on cycling, we're taking too much time on the topic of cycling versus the bigger topic of carbon emission for the country. But I would say it is not a problem because, and my belief is very certain on that. Everyone, we need to take what we can. And if it is cycling, if it is sorting your trash, if it is picking up plastic on a beach, whatever it is, and how, no matter how small it can be, and how also kind of egoist it can be, because maybe you're picking up plastic on the beach because you also like walking on the beach. It could feel small, it could feel specific, but it's very important because it's what drives you. So I think you should take that angle and not be ashamed that, I'm not the guy or the girl that's going to stop a ship from hunting whales. So I'm not that person, or I'm not that minister of whatever that takes big decisions. But still, this small angle that I'm taking is a good angle because it helps the planet. But it needs to be not only important in terms of climate action, but it needs also to be fulfilling for you and meaningful for you.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful when people can talk from their heart and their own experience, which is also what I like about my podcast and everything. I can speak with you and with other people who talk about what they do the best, what they know the best, what they're dedicated to talk about. And I think talking about that is so much more meaningful and talks to a person heart to heart.
Mm-hmm.
Than if you just talk about a general topic like climate change is happening, what do we do about it? Of course, this is an important issue, but this is so big, it's almost behind us, and it's not so feasible. It doesn't touch us as deeply as a story can touch a person. So I understand what you're saying. I also want to talk a little bit more about a COP before we round up this conversation, because you talked earlier about the Blue Zone and you were mentioning that you talked to a couple of
political leaders or
decision makers in their countries. So I'm wondering, you carried a couple of proposals to COP, 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to share these propositions and what was the impact that they had?
I can tell you that during this COP, it's like you have the feeling that the clock is ticking. You have 2 weeks and you have 2 weeks and you have 30,000 people. And the question is, among these people, who is going to be efficient and useful to your cause? And it's really a rush. It's really a race that you need to be interacting with as many people as possible. So one of the tricks we were using, just sharing that with you, is we were dressed as cyclists. So after a while, people, they recognize us and say, oh yeah, you're the cyclist. Oh, I remember. And we had our bicycles in front, parked just in front of the COP. And this was like, oh, what are these bicycles doing here? They look like bicycles used by people that do long distance. We had our bags and all that. So you use certain tricks in order to talk to as many people as possible. And we talked to a lot of people. We did TV interviews. We did the journalist interviews. We met with the UK Minister of Environment, with the climate envoy, the envoy for the climate from the Netherlands. I shake hands with the vice president of the European Investment Bank that carry 40 billion of green projects per year. We had many exchange, like the director of transport for the World Bank. So I'm saying a lot of banks, which I recognize sometimes is not so well seen, but banks can also be for good. All this to say that we had many meetings. Now, what will come out of that? It's very hard to say because, we thought about what's going to be our criteria for being successful or not. It's very hard to say, is it, that this person saw you, or Or, for instance, when the Minister of Environment of UK, she's actually called the Minister of Nature, she had us applaud, she had the crowd applaud us at an event that she was speaking at. Is this going to have an impact? Is this going to have an impact because the journalist that was here then made an article and mentioned about cycling? It's very, very difficult to know how much impact there will be.
If I can ask, what do you mean with having the crowd applaud?
Well, she said, she pointed at us because I prepared the grounds in this meeting, and I said will be here in the audience, and we would like to convey a small message. And she was talking in this event, and she said an event which is part of the COP, and she said, and I would like to praise in particular the team of cyclists that came all the way from Paris to show that cycling is a mobility that we have to highlight, underline when we're reducing our carbon footprint. So the whole audience applauded, and then we could deliver our message to the full audience.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then in this audience, there were several journalists from a different newspaper, and we know they took this news and incorporated it into their articles. So how much you measure the impact of that? It's hard. What will happen from that? And I would say in the end, it doesn't matter. I mean, although we would like to know how many kilometers of bike lane will happen thanks to our meeting that we did on the way and at the COP, in the end, it doesn't matter because there's something which is very important for change. It's culture and mindset. And I think we're part of this. So we make that cycling is seen as something which is more obvious for everyone. Cycling is seen as a way to also help with the climate, against the climate change. So this mindset will progressively, thanks to all the collective work, from us, from the NGOs, from everyone who's taking their bike to go to work every day and showing to other people that they can do it. I think it's how we can be efficient and how we can bring change.
And so you had these 10 proposals, 10 different papers you wrote and you wanted to bring? Or was that like one paper with 10 proposals that you then published and wanted to create awareness about? How did you handle those?
Well, we had an artifact about it. We had a banner that was mentioning about these 10 proposals, and we were symbolically having people sign behind this banner. And this was like the visual artifact.
You don't have to mention all of them, but what were like the top 3 proposals?
Yeah, I can give you proposal number 1, for instance, is to commit to have basic biking lane infrastructure by 2030. Why 2030? Because it's the 5 years plan that the countries are putting together. And why do I say basic? Because it's a global proposal. So it addresses, let's say, Germany, for instance, that for sure has the basic infrastructure in many cities already. But for other countries, the first goal is to get the basic infrastructure together. And then the same proposal we say, and if you already have a basic infrastructure, build an ambitious one by 2030. So it was to say that you must have a biking infrastructure. And it may sound obvious in some cities, but there are many cities that are. It's amazing. The gap and the discrepancy between cities on this topic of biking is really amazing. And then there were other proposals on training people, on making plans, on financing. So.
Okay. And where can we find these proposals?
So they're online. If you type COP29 bike, you will find our site, which is a COP29 bike ride. You can just click and review these proposals. They were actually built by experts, reviewed by experts, reviewed by all the biking NGOs and the political leaders that we met on the way and at COP. So they're really a good summary of what should be a biking policy. So I encourage anyone who's in charge of cycling or transport in their cities to look at them, because if you use this as a framework to your action, you will not miss anything, and you probably will have good guidelines into what should be done.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're coming to the end. At the end of every episode, I have a couple of fire questions. Those can be answered with one word or one phrase. So if you're ready to go, we can start that.
Okay, I'll try to be brief and quick, which I haven't been so far, Clara.
All right. First question, how old are you now?
Cannot forget, I stopped at 45, so I'm 55.
How old were you the first time you traveled to another continent?
I was 18.
What's the longest time you've been away from home?
This time I was away for almost 6 months. So like I'm saying is I feel like my apartment and I became kind of strangers. But that is getting better every day. So
Good, good. Would you rather see a lot of places or get to know one place really well?
this has changed because I would say more naturally getting to know a lot of places. But I'm fascinated and I'm learning so much is that you see, I mean, it's hard to say quickly, so I'll just take the time to explain that. When you take a fast mode of transport, you're going very quickly, very far away, and you're forgetting everything that's in between this location far away and where you are. In every of this location, you could in fact stay there and dig down and get to meet people, get to understand better culture, get to understand what's happening. It is important, and I think also part of our climate adaptation that we adapt to realize there's a lot of richness where we are. But that said, you know, the appetite for moving is here. So try to combine both and take a bicycle, and then you can go far and still see a lot what's in between those 2 points.
All right. Next question. Would you rather save money on accommodation or pay for a good bed?
I would say we we slept in some very funny places. We were hosted also for free many times. And when you're hosted, you don't choose your bed, and sometimes it's the couch or sometimes it's the floor. And so I would say we would save because we want our journey to last long.
Okay. What word would you teach a foreigner who wants to learn your language?
I would tell them bonjour, au revoir, merci, hello, goodbye, thank you, because we crossed 11 countries, so every time you need to learn these words. So that's a very good start.
Bonjour, au revoir, merci. That's French. All right. What can't you travel without?
It's a reality. I cannot travel without my smartphone.
All right. Okay.
Because it gets me connected to the world. It's a window to the world. And, you know, when you write for such a long time, I still had to take care of about my work life to the maximum extent possible, which was not so strong, but I had to manage from a distance. And also, like I said, I'm a town councillor, so I had to be in virtual meetings to keep track and keep taking decisions. So I would say smartphone is really the efficient thing. Yeah, so a smartphone. Yeah.
What's your favorite travel song or a song that you like to listen to on the road while you're cycling, or that reminds you of cycling?
There's this funny, totally cheesy country song, which is called, I think it says Country Road, Alabama, something like this.
Country road,
exactly.
take me home. Yeah, I know the song.
Place where I belong. Woo! And it's funny, I used to play that a bit, and the people in the ride were making fun of me. I used to blast it on the speaker on the bike, and I would say, yeah.
I love that song as well. Okay, Next question, a tricky one. Why do you travel?
Because I can't help but travel. I'm trying to think also, I'm trying to rationalize me and say, you should travel less, but no, I can't help it. It's like, it's a drive that, you stay where you are and say, no, I want to see what's behind. You want to see the kind of, maybe, I don't know, it's a lack of serenity. It's I would say curiosity or appetite for uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. All right. Then I want to ask you one more question, because you were mentioning earlier a little game that you played with people to tell why you cycle. So I want to give you the floor for 1 minute to give me as many reasons as possible why to cycle.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
Okay, so you cycle because you want to be happy or it makes you happy. You cycle because it makes you in good physical condition, it keeps you in good physical condition. You cycle because it's cheaper to use a bicycle than a car or a bus or anything. You cycle because it allows you to meet with people. This thing doesn't happen, there's always this interaction which doesn't happen in a car. You cycle because you save the planet. You cycle because you cycle with others, so it's a way of being in company. You cycle because
20 seconds left.
yes, and I'm not good at the game that I invented myself. You cycle because finance, health. I think these are it's
Ding,
good that I
ding,
stay.
ding, 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 ding.
And you want to know the funny story? Is there's a guy that wrote a book. He wrote 137 reasons. That's
Ooh.
big, huh? And the city that got the most number of answers during 1 minute, it's a city that answered 23 reasons.
Wow. But with a group, I guess, not one person, it was a group.
It was a group, but it was, the problem is after a while, if you're considering these reasons, they kind of overlap. However, all these reasons that I said are very important. If you can be happy in good physical condition, good interaction with others, and be wary of expenses, I think it's a lot of things. And then you do this within a context that you are part of the climate change or the climate protections. I would say this is already very strong.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. At the end, can you tell me where can my listeners find you? Like you already mentioned the website. The website is called COP29bikeride.org.
Exactly.
I will put the link in the show notes. But is there any other way that people could reach out to you if they have any questions?
You could go to Instagram, type COP29 Bike Ride, you will find us. You do the same on Facebook. So if you can't find anything directly in your usual social networks, you can go to our website where the list is mentioned at the bottom of the page.
All right, perfect. I will put that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really had a nice time. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you very much, Clara. And the last word is we have things cooking for next year, so please follow us.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Where is COP next year?
It's in Belém in Brazil.
So that's going to be a challenge coming from Paris.
If that happens, we're not sure. Follow us.
All right.
You'll see, and maybe you can help us achieve it.
Yes, that would be great. And I'm really curious to follow that road as well. So I will also keep a close eye on your organization. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Voilà. Merci beaucoup. This was Travel Devil, brought to you by me, your host, Clara Francken. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to continue the conversation or suggest any future guests, you can go to my Instagram @Clara Francken. Take care, and I will see you next Thursday.